headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
And I think the thing is, there's a lot of growing anger, but do you know what this is at the moment? We're at the stage where the tide is turning, and it's turning because of the hypocrisy and because of the suffering people are aware that was caused by the rules. And in fact, that's really very much the main thrust of yesterday. MPs waving the shrouds of misery that have been caused by the rules. So this is only just the beginning. The tide is turning.
Yes.
To quote Boris Johnson, there is a tidal wave coming. It's not Omicron.
No.
It's going to be a tidal wave of anger.
Yes.
And I've foreseen this since the beginning, that if you frighten a whole country beyond the scale of the threat, if you deliberately amplify fear, what will follow next is anger. It's like the stages of grief.
Yes.
We're on a course here, and they're not going to be able to course correct out of it. However much they're going about parties or the Ukraine, you can't course correct out of the response that's coming.
Isn't it a bit like when you watch the tsunami and the tide going out, and suddenly you see the fish on the bottom of the sea, and then you just know in about 5 minutes it's all going to come back. Unfortunately, it's going to be coming back really fast.
That's a delicious metaphor.
Yes.
I like that. At the moment, Boris Johnson's like a fish, like kind of flapping around and floundering as he's waiting for the tidal wave. There's not much you can do about this tidal wave. It's coming.
And you know, it's interesting you say that, because I had the exact same kind of moment of clarity as alcoholics sometimes say. And yesterday, while watching, because I was kind of watching it slightly open-mouthed in horror and kind of surprise and just I couldn't quite believe what I'm seeing and hearing. But at one point, I remember thinking quite clearly, he deserves all of this, and he's getting it now, because it might be that the people giving it to him are disingenuous. It might be that the MPs bringing up these grief tales are doing it for effect, and, you know, that's probably true. But for all of the misery that he caused, and for all the things that everybody went through, he deserves to be hauled over the coals, don't you think?
Yeah, but it's not even started yet. The thing is that every MP who voted for stricter restrictions, that is almost the entirety of the Labour Party, to now be talking about suffering, is that, you know, they're still missing the point. And at some point, the point will be unmissable. Although Jeremy Hunt's still missing it. He tweeted today, I'm going to quote him, "I was intending to introduce mandatory flu vaccinations in my final year as Health Secretary before I was moved to another role." Well, thank goodness he's in another role then. I think he's not reading the room correctly. But then he goes on to say this, Mike. "Who will now believe the government next time it tries to do the right thing? What happens if we get a more dangerous variant than Omicron? Staff who reluctantly got jabbed to keep their job will feel cheated." Well, quite Jeremy Hunt. Who will believe the government next time? This series of tweets he did this morning is like an elegy to Nudge. It's a lament that the propaganda hasn't worked. And he's completely missed the point. I think it is an incredibly embarrassing way to talk about the electorate as though we're naughty children, and as though the government is a strict parent who must follow through on its threats.
And
they said that NHS workers must get vaccinated, and now they might be saying that they don't have to.
Right.
So will we believe their threats next time? The point is that we're not children to be threatened by a government. And who might act up next time.
No, and also for him to say that kind of thing, like, you know, trying to do the right thing. You know, so many terrible events have happened in history because somebody said they were doing the right thing. You know, it was for your own good. Yeah. And basically we had to do this because we had no other choice, because we're doing the right thing. Yeah. Well, we don't elect the government to do the right thing. We elect the government to do what they said they were going to do and carry out the will of the people and the manifesto that they promised to enact, right? And doing the right thing is a very dangerous phrase, in my view.
Well, I completely concur with you. You've got it the right way round. I think I've got it the right way round. Jeremy Hunt's entirely missing the point. He's not our strict parent to threaten us and cajole us into doing the right thing. As another example, I'm going to credit Lucy Easthope for this. Follow her on Twitter if you don't already. There aren't many people who know more about disaster and recovery than Professor Lucy Easthope. She commented on some words that Rob used this morning on Good Morning Britain. It's very clever neuro-linguistic programming in a sense. He said, "The public now want us to focus on the business at hand, not parties." So he's telling us what we want. Yeah. He's already fast-forwarding us into the response he wants us to have. Yes. Plus talking about what's important. Like, don't think about the trivia of parties, silly little people. What you want is to think about this important stuff. Now, the interesting thing about Rob is he's the first UK politician I noticed to use the term the new normal. People have to be aware that although we think of politicians sometimes as bumbling around and making clumsy mistakes and cock-ups and clowns sometimes, the fact is that a lot of the language is very deliberately chosen in order to engineer a response in you. And this is part of a government which has been incredibly reliant upon nudge, propaganda and the fear campaign, which you know that I talk about all the time. And I think that, you know, I really liked Steve's spotlight yesterday on this question, because we can't let the spotlight move away. You know, this epidemic is going to go. It will go eventually.
Yeah.
But we're left with a government that thinks it's okay to prod, threaten and deceive a population into complying with unpopular policies.
And there are plenty of people out there now who are willing to tell the government they've got it wrong and they shouldn't have done a U-turn on NHS mandatory vaccinations, as if mandatory vaccinations have ever been a thing.
Yeah.
And just because it was introduced as a possibility, they now think that it should happen. And you kind of go in, imagine if we'd been sitting here 3 years ago and I said to you, there will be very many important people, MPs, members of the NHS, doctors, you know, educators, you know, academics, and they're all calling for people to be forced to have a vaccination. You would have laughed in my face.
Yeah. Actually, there's another thing I want to say about this. I had my bloods taken last week and the phlebotomist didn't know who I was. I didn't say anything about vaccines. I said nothing, like, I swear. And she just brought up out of the blue with me. And I was so shocked she did it. She said, I had to have the vaccine and I'm really sad about it. I was really taken aback.
Wow.
I said, oh, do you mean the COVID vaccine?
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, because we're going to lose our jobs if we don't have it. You know, she obviously needed to get it off her chest.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, gosh, that's really tough if you didn't want to have it. And she said, yeah, and I've got to have the second one. I said, well, hang on. Do you want the second one? And she said, no. And I said, well, do you know there are petitions? Do you know there are lawyers that are looking at this? And she didn't know anything about all of that. So she had the right person. She was getting off her chest. So I wrote some things down for her, the Together Declaration, Big Brother Watch, law or fiction on Twitter. I gave her some different things to look at. And I said to her, that's just really sad if you feel bullied into having it if you don't want it. And I'm thinking about her, now this mandate's being turned around. So she had a medical procedure she didn't want to keep her job. Now, if I was her, I would be feeling really, she felt sick and violated anyway, it's obvious. But now, added to that, this feeling that she did it unnecessarily to keep her job, I think that's a really sickening position to be in.
It is.
I feel kind of violated,
She
really,
should never
on
be
her
put
behalf.
in that position. I was speaking earlier to a representative of a charity that's involved in sort of respite care, and she was saying, you know, we're now in a period of consultation, supposedly, to find out whether the people who lost their jobs in the care sector can get them back, if they still want them. Because surely that should be the case, shouldn't it?
Of course it should be.
You know, they've crippled the care sector by making those people lose their jobs because there's now not enough people in the care sector caring. So people are stuck in hospital, so they're screwing up the NHS. People can't get into the beds in the hospital because the old people can't be moved out. You know, they've created all of this in the same way that Boris Johnson has created Partygate, whatever you want to call it. And we can't just not mention it because he's such a great guy.
Yeah.
You know?
So Jeremy Hunt asks who will believe the government next time. I don't think that phlebotomist will. I don't think the people who lost their jobs will. I don't think that anyone who's become cognizant of the level of propaganda, the fear, the vaccine mandates, the vaccine passports, the incentives and the various coercive tactics to have them, none of us who are aware of that now are going to believe the government next time.
No.
And this is a bed entirely of their own making, but we all have to suffer for it. So,
in the same way that we'll never ever believe Sage ever again because they got it so wrong. None of what they said was true. And we can only assume that their motive was not to do the right thing, but it was to make us behave in a certain way. I resent that.
It could still have been, in their views, supposedly in our best interests. It's a really horrid form of paternalism.
I don't vote for anybody who wants to do something in my best interest. I'll do what I do in my best interest. Thanks very much indeed. I don't need any help.
Well, we don't, do we? None of us do. We just need the facts and the information and to make up our own minds. We don't need to be coerced into doing the right thing.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.